Hello to all of our Omaha area firefighters and first responders, and a very special thank you to our Fit for Duty committee for inviting me to be part of your guys' overall health journey. My name is Lauren Moore. I am a bionutritionist with Renew Institute, and I am excited about the chance to really take that Fit for Duty mission to equip our Omaha area firefighters and first responders with more health integrated information that revolves around mindset, that revolves around exercise and fitness, as well as looping in the really key piece of nutrition. And that's where my specialty will kind of be. And I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce myself and give you guys some background information on exactly where I plan to take a lot of our education going forward into using nutrition as part of our healthcare journey. So my name is Lauren Moore. I've been an active participant in the Omaha area health and fitness community for the better part of the last 8 years. I have participated personally in a lot of fun runs, got into CrossFit events, and I worked as a personal trainer. And now I brought my nutrition coaching business to a private regenerative health medicine clinic here in town called Renew Institute. So as part of my mission and my mission as a whole, we want to make sure that nutrition is something that is viewed as an integrative part of our healthcare model, and not putting it as something that's outside or something that's just used as a body composition or a weight loss tool, but it truly has the power to modulate our entire health outcome. So when we think about firefighters and first responders, we obviously think about all of the different care that we need to take from a physical and a mental aspect to really restore our body to show up as the best version of ourselves to others in need. And the first thing that we usually think of is this population of individuals really carrying a very high load of stress. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys and talk you through a few different ways where we can actually use nutrition to understand it can either be something that's contributing to stress or something that's relieving your stress. So when I think about stress, we want to think that all of our stressors go into one common stress bucket, and that stress bucket can get immensely heavy for those of us that are in a job-related activity that has a lot of uncontrollable stressors, right? So all of your stressors, whether they're controllable or uncontrollable, go into the same bucket, and our job is to make sure that our bucket does not overflow. When our stress bucket is overflowing, that is when health concerns start to really arise. It can play into our entire metabolic health, which we'll understand in a second. But I wanted to at least give you guys a perspective on all of the different sources of stress in our lives, making sure that we know that as firefighters and first responders, there's going to be a lot of uncontrollable stressors that inadvertently fill your bucket differently than somebody else in a different occupation. So that means that as ourselves, we need to, one, develop a body that is resilient to stress. And two, we need to make sure that we are understanding that we have a much smaller window for adding controllable stressors to that bucket. So we want to be very careful that even when we integrate things like nutrition and exercise strategies, that we're very cautious of, is that something that is truly health promoting to my body? Is that something that is relieving stress from my body? Or is it something that could potentially even be viewed as a stressor? So when we think about why stress is so important to begin with, is because when we're looking at how the human body works, we're really looking at an entire integrated system called our hormone hierarchy, right? So there is a systematic order of operations as far as how things should be supported, and also the order in which things tend to break down. So when we view where does stress management fit into our overall health scheme, it is a big foundation of that overall hormone hierarchy. And it's when that stress bucket is consistently overflowing that we start to see degradation in the entire pyramid. We start to see gut health issues pop up. We start to see thyroid issues pop up. We start to see declines in sex hormone production. We start to see inconsistent menstrual cycles, a drop in testosterone, difficulty building muscle, changes in libido and energy and fat storage, you name it, right? All of these, though, we really want to trace back to how how are we supporting the foundation of that pyramid? How are we looking at uncontrollable stressors coming in and making sure that we're not accidentally putting healthy behaviors on top of a stress bucket that actually our body might view as worse, right? So that's something that I'm very passionate about, is helping people navigate diet culture and understand and debunk what are those different nutrition strategies that are right for me versus what might be more applicable to somebody else's stress bucket load, right? So when I think about stress management, yes, we're going to have a bunch of uncontrollable stressors in your bucket, but we want to focus on the controllable stuff, right? I want to make sure that we're not accidentally putting things within our control on top of that situation. So when we think about what is probably the biggest controllable stressor that we have within our power, it is going to be blood sugar balance. So you can see how the bottom of that foundation really transforms into something specific. Instead of just thinking stress management as a whole, which kind of leads us to think like, oh, this utopian society where I have no stress, that's not realistic, right? Especially in your particular job description, you're going to have stress. It's a matter of, are we building a stress resilient body? And are we making sure that we're not accidentally, with our nutrition and lifestyle, putting other controllable stressors on top and overflowing the small capacity we have left for that bucket? So when I think about our most controllable strategy, it goes back to blood sugar balance, right? What you eat, when you eat, how you eat, and what you don't eat as well. This is more than likely your body's biggest stressor on a day-to-day basis, because it is something that is changing multiple times a day, every day. So our blood sugar rises when we eat, our blood sugar falls when we don't eat. We have a pretty good understanding of this, but a lot of times we don't think about blood sugar balance as a nutrition strategy. We only think about blood sugar balance when it comes to a diagnosable condition, such as someone having type 1 or type 2 diabetes, or a known hypoglycemic event, right? Which might mean of one of the reasons why you guys get called, right? So we see this probably very often in the field, but for us to be able to feel it and use this as a main focus of how we choose to fuel our body on a daily basis is something that I want to equip you guys with, is a better understanding that, hey, if we want to make sure that our diet is truly a healthy diet for us, it can't be something that's accidentally causing more stress in the bucket, or in that same sentence, something that is driving us on a blood sugar roller coaster. So I want to try to help you guys minimize the high blood sugar scenarios with what you're choosing to eat. But I also want to help equip you guys with education on how to minimize blood sugar lows, especially when we're expending a tremendous amount of energy, emotional energy, physical energy, and really even just carrying the stress of different sleep patterns and things like that as well. So the nutritional needs of your particular job occupation is going to be different than the general fitness population. And we want to make sure that we're taking that into account so that you guys can also enjoy the best job performance, but also see, feel, and look the way that you want to look, and not accidentally integrate unhealthy behaviors into that, right? So yes, we can talk about blood sugar highs as it comes to diet strategy, but I also want to make you guys aware of the lows, because the lows is where our hormone called cortisol comes into play. Cortisol being our body's main stress hormone. Its job is to save your blood sugar as energy resources are being used up really quickly, right? So this is your survival mechanism. It kicks in very effectively, but we don't want to keep our body in that state if we can help it, right? Because as we saw with our hormone hierarchy, if we have blood sugar issues, if we're dealing with chronic blood sugar and dealing with chronic uncontrollable stressors, that cortisol is going to pull a lot of resources towards making more stress hormone. And then that same pool of cholesterol isn't available to help make adequate progesterone for menstrual cycles. That cholesterol pool isn't available to make adequate testosterone for muscle mass, right? So we need to be very careful of understanding that, hey, the more stress we have, the more blood sugar highs and lows that we have, we're pulling dysfunction in that entire hormone hierarchy. And this is very often where I start to see individuals' health decline very quickly and start to deal with some of those daily symptoms of hormonal imbalance because they haven't addressed the stress, right? So when I think about the ultimate time for kind of that adrenal health check, it is now. Unmanaged stressors break down the entire hormone hierarchy. And so instead of thinking about the uncontrollable stressors, let's really put our focus towards what we can control. I want to help you guys debunk some diet culture myths out there that I see as potential things that you might accidentally be adding to your stress bucket, and making sure that you understand and okay, what is a healthy habit for me? What type of nutritional things should I be thinking about that are actually going to get me closer to my goals, even if that differs from the average health and fitness population or the latest diet trends that are out there. So when we have to think about the fact of like, what are some certain things we might be doing that are actually adding stress, skipping meals, this idea of intermittent fasting, let's talk about it. Is that something that's adding stress, or is that really a health promoting behavior? Same thing of our dependency on caffeine sources throughout the day. That is usually often a sign of blood sugar imbalances, right? What is our relationship with things like caffeine and alcohol? Even things like demonizing food groups or yo-yo dieting. What should your relationship with carbohydrates be? How should males and females be thinking about different relationships and energy allocation strategies, right? And even with your guys's very physically demanding jobs, we have to even just understand, what does that overall caloric need look like? How do we make sure that we're not sitting here under eating our basal metabolic rate or our activity level? Just as much as we don't want to over consume, right? We also need to make sure, and we're aware of the metabolic detriments of chronic underconsumption too. So layering all of that in, we sometimes don't realize that these health promoting behaviors that we're trying and experimenting with may or may not be right for us. And we have to really dive in and understand that those things could be adding stress to our bucket and contributing to blood sugar imbalances, which is the opposite direction of where I want you guys to go when it comes to thinking about your nutrition strategy. So knowing that we're going to be playing around with, like I said, getting us out of that chronic fight or flight nervous system, right? When used properly, nutrition can be an essential tool in your toolbox to actually help you manage stress, right? Not contribute to stress, but manage stress. And you can bet that a blood sugar low scenario is definitely a fight or flight response, right? That is our body's job in a low energy scenario, is to get blood sugar back up. But we want to be able to do that with food and not have our body constantly be compensating on that front, because it's very energy taxing. So in our time together over the course of the next few months, I want to bring to light really teaching you guys a lot of different concepts and topics about nutrition, specifically how to balance your blood sugar. What does it look like to build a blood sugar balancing meal? What are those daily habits and behaviors and those non-negotiables that I want you guys to be thinking about when you're coming up with meals that you're making for your entire department, or meals that you're sharing with family outside of your shift as well? Other ways that we can use our nutrition to optimize our circadian rhythm and sleep. How can we use our nutrition to promote gut health? How can we also use nutrition to help reduce anxiety and depression? How do we use nutrition to support mental health? And even how do we use nutrition as a means to minimize dependency on different substances? You would be surprised how many individuals use things like caffeine and alcohol as a stimulant and a depressant, just simply because their blood sugars are all over the place and they don't have a natural means of regulating energy through food. So we look to these outside sources to really do it for us, right? So we want to kind of bring to the table a different conversation about how to use food as a powerful mechanism to not have so much of that dependency on those outside resources. Not zero, because they can be part of life enjoyment, but just not the dependency factor on them. And then not to overlook even the concept of using nutrition to support things like body composition, muscle mass, and overall job performance. So overall, I want you guys to start thinking about, starting today, what are some of the ways that your entire hormone hierarchy is or is not being supported by what you're eating, when you're eating, how you're eating, or what you're not eating. So if you haven't, I would think a very good starting spot is to gather some data. I always say what isn't measured isn't managed. And with the fire department having incredible insurance benefits, you guys have that leeway to be able to be connected to a secondary provider that is very knowledgeable in taking some in-depth, comprehensive hormone panels, really being able to look at some data metrics like your body fat percentage or your visceral fat value, waist circumference. When was the last time you had a comprehensive lipid panel to look at your cholesterol and triglycerides and HDL? When was the last time, if ever, you've had a full sex hormone panel or a full thyroid panel, or someone that's really looking at the state of your overall blood sugar values right now? Not just your fasting glucose, but things like your A1C score, things like a fasting insulin. All of these are sometimes things that you have to specifically request or visit a practitioner like us at Renew Institute, who have a very strong background in not just drawing labs for diagnostic values, but really looking for optimal ranges and starting to identify some proactive management of that entire hormone hierarchy. We at Renew Institute, we don't just talk about hormones. We don't just talk, we want to maximize all of it, right? From hormones to prescription therapies, to nutrition, to exercise. How are we supporting that hormone hierarchy from a foundation up perspective, knowing that that's going to be the best case scenario in which all of our different interventions are going to really thrive. So taking it with a grain of salt and taking today as kind of a level setting conversation around maybe you not thinking so much about how nutrition is such a powerful regulator of our overall metabolic health, or using it as such a foundational part of our overall healthcare journey, and getting excited about some of our future conversations where we're going to really be able to bring things like blood sugar balance to light and understand that nutrition can be a powerful modulator of our stress management. So again, thank you so much for the Fit for Duty community for welcoming me and my team into your educational newsletters and presentations. So I look forward to even more conversations and engagement strategies with you guys in the months ahead. Thank you.